My name's Isabel Foxen Duke. I'm super excited to be here. I'm a BitVM stan, I would say. I'm a fan of what's going on in this world. But yeah, excited to kind of speak with the three of you who have all kind of made somewhat unique contributions each to this space, and just kind of tell a little bit of the story of BitVM, get a little bit of historical context of this technology for folks who might be new, although I know there are a lot of kind of advanced BitVM thinkers in this room right now. So feel free to raise your hands and ask any questions that you may have that I'm missing along the way. We'll also probably do a little Q&A at the end. And yeah, hopefully we'll just sort of dig into, again, sort of some of the historical context and like the evolution of this technology, because it's changed so much in such this short period of time over the past couple of years. And then kind of move into maybe what we can expect in the future looking forward, and maybe a little bit of context on philosophical questions related to BitVM, which was a request by Sergio. So I'm excited to dive into that. So why don't we just start? Folks, introduce yourselves each, and I would love for you each to share kind of what you each have contributed to BitVM, or like how you uniquely kind of got into this world, because you each sort of have three different kind of special stories, I think, about like what you're doing in this world and how you got into this tech.
Hello. Okay, so difficult to make the whole story short, but in 2012, I published in the Bitcoin forums a method that I called at that time P2P TradeX, which was the first time someone had this idea that one chain should validate the consensus of another chain. I wanted to trade between Bitcoin and Litecoin or some other chains, and I'd say, okay, if there is a Turing complete chain, then we can validate Bitcoin consensus. And at that time, of course, there was no other chain with smart contracts to do that. But I was fixing my mind that this idea of breaching chains was something very powerful. And when I had this opportunity to create the first breach for a chain, which for the Rostock sidechain, the first Bitcoin sidechain, I spent a lot of time researching what would be the best technology to do. And at that time, the only feasible thing that people were discussing was drive chains, because the Blockstream sidechains paper was kind of the Blockstream guys decided not to pursue that. They thought it was not a good idea. So at that point in time, there was no actual technology to breach. So I created the first drive chain BIP. Then the post-store came. So I was very interested in how to breach Bitcoin. So I designed the Rostock breach. And then, nothing else could be done in Bitcoin without an advancement in the capabilities of Bitcoin. And so in 2022, I co-founded Fairgate with the idea to enhance this idea of privacy enhancing technologies and do something with zero knowledge and garbled circuits and homomorphic encryption. We had a lot of ideas, but once it started, then we have this discovery of BitVM. So for me, it was like, wow, I can mix my experience and my let's say my life dedicated to breaching Bitcoin with the actual technology we are building. So we decided, okay, let's do this. Let's improve BitVM. Let's try to get the best of it.
This is interesting. I just want to note before we move on, you've mentioned this twice now, that you were thinking and researching garbled circuits before BitVM 1 actually ever happened. I don't know if we want to put a pin in that for later, but
well, Fairgate's name comes to garbled circuit, actually.
How did that?
The gate thing is garbled circuit.
Okay, so we're going to come back to this in the garbled circuit section, but I definitely want to hear more about that.
At the logo, yeah.
Oh my gosh, I didn't notice. All right, amazing. Okay, good to know. So pin in that, we'll circle back because that's very interesting. Liam, go ahead.
Yeah, I had been doing snark research for a while, and then I don't know if people know this, but there's this guy Sam Parker who's kind of involved in the prehistory of BitVM, and I was with him and Aki thinking about how to verify a snark on Bitcoin. So we were just like going through snark papers and like I think it was like Orion or something.
Was Robin in the group yet, or was
No, I'd never met Robin. And so Sam went to Bitcoin Miami and created this group with Robin and Super and a few other people. I think you were in it, yeah. And so people were talking about it, trying to verify snarks on Bitcoin. And I also mentioned garbled circuits in the context of this before Robin published the BitVM paper. And then, I joined Alpin. I worked on BitVM stuff there, sort of this reinvigoration of garbled circuits. Jeremy and I kind of had the same idea and talked about it before he published Delbrag. And so that's sort of how I ended up here.
Perfect.
The year I started working on Bitcoin was in 2017, and one of my favorite things that came out that year was a video by Andreas Antonopoulos, in which he did this lecture about Bitcoin script and how it works, and he had a little blackboard, and he wrote a Bitcoin script on the blackboard and executed it on the blackboard step by step, showing how Bitcoin script worked. And I thought, that's so cool. I want to do that. I want to make Bitcoin scripts that do crazy and unimaginable things. So I started investigating it, finding out how to use tools, and no one else was really doing anything with script. So I would show off what I was making at BitDevs and stuff, and I started experimenting with logic gates because I found the most powerful tool you can use in Bitcoin script to do computation was that it has support for all of the logic gates. So I started building little functions. I started making circuit boards on a circuit diagram, and then I would translate them into Bitcoin script and show them off at a BitDevs. And everyone there was like, this is kind of neat, but it was difficult for people to understand what I was doing with logic gates because we don't really use, unless you're a chip manufacturer, you don't really work with logic gates anymore. Computer science people might learn about it in CS 101, but then 5 years later they forget how they work. So no one really understood what I was working on, but Robin did. I showed him what I was working on, and he was like, that's really cool. I think I can do that to make a virtual machine, because I was making circuit boards, and he was like, ultimately a CPU is a circuit board. It's just a big one, or a really little one, but has a lot of logic gates in it. So he and I started experimenting with that. We made one, and then he wrote the paper, and I published an implementation and said, look, we can do virtual machines on Bitcoin and run any computation. So it was a lot of me being inspired by Andreas Antonopoulos and a few other folks to try and make this stuff on Bitcoin. That BitVM was sort of born from that.
Oh, script lovers for the win, and we're going to talk more about script later in this interview as well. Actually, Super, I have one follow-up question for you, which is, did you, at that time, when the sort of BitVM 1 paper came out, were you thinking about bridging specifically as the use case? When you say people didn't understand what this was or what this would be used for,
I was making triangles.
Okay.
So the first thing that I did that seemed like BitVM was it was difficult to explain. It's called a Rule 110 simulator. There was this computer science guy named Stephen Wolfram, who wrote a book about automatons, cellular automaton. I'm trying to use words that people watching the video might be familiar with. No one knows what an automaton is. No one knows what Rule 110 is. Think of a chessboard with white and black squares, and he would define the top row of the chessboard to have a certain pattern, maybe 3 white squares and 5 black ones, for example. And then he'd define rules that would decide how these things propagate down the board. One of the rules he came up with was called Rule 110. His book is basically a list of different rules and the properties that result of how the chessboard populates based on these rules. One of them was called Rule 110, and it was really interesting. And so I made that in Bitcoin, but it generates triangles, is what it does. It makes really interesting triangular patterns. So I showed that at a BitDevs, and of course, people were like, why are you is this like NFTs? You're putting triangles on the blockchain? And I'm like, no, they don't actually go on the blockchain. They're sort of executed in the RAM of your CPU, and you never see them. I'm like, well, why are you doing this? I'm like, because it's cool. That's why. So, I was making triangles and wasn't really thinking about bridges at all. I was just doing stuff that seemed fun and cool.
There you go. And then it found a use case. That's very tech of you. That's very tech industry of you. Sergio, did you have, I don't know if you had something you wanted to add?
I have a question for Super. Do you know who came up with the idea of Lamport signatures on Bitcoin? I don't know who.
Rob.
The first time that I saw it was a paper by Ruben Thompson in his Advent Calendar series, where he talked about Lamport signatures. I didn't think of them as being useful in, well, what got me interested in them was a paper by by Adam Back about doing fair coin tosses on Bitcoin. And he wrote a paper on this in 2013. He seemed to think you needed opcat to do it, but I figured out a way to do it with Lamport signatures, which I possibly learned about from the Ruben Thompson paper, or at least I don't think I consciously had it in mind, but I had read that paper before doing it. So I figured out a way to do it with Lamport signatures, and then I made an implementation of a fair coin toss on Bitcoin where you can gamble on whether a coin's going to flip heads or tails and use Lamport signatures to import and validate the state. And that was one of the things that introduced me to Robin, because he had a more efficient technique for doing Lamport signatures than I had, and then we started working together.
For context, and I think this is like a really great way to kind of segue into my next question, which was going to be the big unlocks in actually developing BitVM when you were in the sort of pre-BitVM chat phase, you, Robin, Liam, Sam, etc. Lamport signatures, I know, were one of them. Could you just quickly kind of TLDR like how Lamport signatures kind of work?
No, I'm
in
talking
BitVM?
too much. Let him do it.
Okay, Liam, please share, the problem and how Lamport signatures solved them in these like early BitVM days.
Okay. So I guess there's different ways you can think about it, but a Lamport signature, for those who don't know, is a very simple signature scheme. You can sign a single bit, and if you use it multiple times, you can sign multiple bits, but you can only sign them once. And the public key is just 2 hashes, and the private key is the preimage of both of those hashes. And the signature is just one of the preimages. So the problem that like BitVM is trying to deal with is essentially that you cannot share state between Bitcoin transactions without covenants. And Lamport signatures allow you to do this optimistically, because you can sort of prove by presenting both preimages for a bit that somebody has equivocated about a state. So it's like they said the state is this thing here, the state is a different thing here, and you'll get 2 different preimages for the same public key.
Does this effectively allow you to like connect commits? That's the...
You can share state between different Bitcoin scripts.
So were there other kind of major unlocks that came up that proved to be sort of the breakthroughs in BitVM? Like in the early BitVM research days, before BitVM 1 even happened, like what were the big problems that you were trying to solve to get there? I know Lamport signatures were one of the big unlocks. Were there any others?
I think there's like a region that Bitcoin script exists in, and like if you could bypass different sides of it, you could avoid so like if you could introspect a transaction, if you had sufficiently large scripts, if you had a bigger stack, if you had like a bunch of different things, maybe you could get to where you wanted to go. And one of those is sharing state between scripts. So yeah, I don't know.
I can add that the first implementation of a hash function on Bitcoin script enabled many of the things that came later, like a very efficient Blake 2 or SHA 2056 implementation in Bitcoin script. Was very powerful.
So we kind of just covered a little bit of like, oh God, Liam.
I also Robin always brings up connector outputs as an important innovation that enabled a lot of this like transaction graph programming. So maybe that's another.
Oh, I think that's that's what I was thinking about with the commitments. So I'm curious. We kind of just did like a little overview of BitVM 1. We're going to do this sort of historically. BitVM 2 happens, which I think sort of makes BitVM 1 more practical for the use case of bridging. I'm curious, Sergio, if you could maybe share a little bit about what BitVM 2 is, like TLDR, and why you guys built something a little bit different than Robin's implementation of BitVM 2. Maybe a little bit of the differences between Robin's 2 and your BitVMX.
Mm-hmm. So BitVM 2 is a protocol that it's made to be single round. So it's requires very low amount of time. The challenge window is short, and it also has this property that anyone can challenge. Even if it's very expensive to challenge, anyone can challenge. We thought that this was not good for one of the bridges we were designing because the current Rootstock bridge is very, very cheap. So we cannot offer the Rootstock community a new bridge that completely, I mean, has some drawbacks that the old one did not. We had to improve upon the current design. So the current bridge is pretty decentralized, like in the sense that it is a federation, but there's many things that make it quite decentralized. So we needed to offer something that as decentralized, and we thought, okay, this is a nice property that anyone can challenge, but actually, when you need to prove that a payout is malicious, you actually for protocols that require proof of work, you need to be able to provide a counter proof. It's not only that you prove the statement is false, but you have to be able to say, okay, your chain, your fork, is not the honest one because there is one that is honest and is larger. It has more cumulative work, and that brings you back to a setup where you have a set of known operators or watchtowers. So the benefit of having this permissionless challenge is diluted by the fact that when you implement it actually on proof of work chains, you actually need to be able to counterproof. And this counterproof cannot be made in a permissionless setting because you need to set up these private one-time public keys in advance. So we thought, why are we doing something very expensive that does not provide any improvement if we can do it very cheaply using the original the original idea of implementing a CPU?
Just for clarification, you said the rootstock community would not be happy about a bridge that is essentially more expensive than what they were already using. But you would theoretically be getting this, additional better trust assumption, right? And do you feel that users are unwilling to pay more for better trust assumptions?
Well, this is philosophical. I think that if there is a bridge that is only very large liquidity providers can use, and then that becomes a centralization point, a censorship point, the governments can go after these very few participants who, in a sense, control the bridge. So I think that philosophically, the idea for me of having a decentralized bridge is like anyone can join, and it's cheap to join. Like not only a few participants can do it. So yeah, I think that from that perspective, it wouldn't be kind of accepted by the Rootstock community.
And again, just sort of like steel manning this, like what are the trade-offs? Like what's the core trade-off that BitVMX is making versus BitVM2?
Totally, that's a good question. So originally in Robin's original protocol, the number of rounds you needed to solve this dispute, to resolve this dispute, was about 64 or something like, or 32, a very big number. And this is because one of the key technologies that is used is very simple. Actually, is the binary search for a faulty instruction requires many rounds. And if you do this in a binary fashion, like partition it into 2 intervals each time, then you need a lot of rounds. And so withdrawal can take a lot of time in the case of a dispute. But we can improve on that. But once you have the system working, you can do an n-ary partition. You don't have to partition in just 2 parts. You can partition in 16 parts if you want. So basically, you can reduce the number of rounds. So you have the freedom to pick your own trade-off. And I think that with many advancements that we have designed, we could reduce the number of rounds to 10 rounds probably without problem. So I don't see this as, I mean, if you combine a protocol that can take 10 rounds, but it's much cheaper, and by much cheaper I mean just $100 of bucks, right? It's much cheaper. If you combine this with a happy path, where every of the operators sign and just transfer the amount to the end user, then I think you get quite the best of both worlds, because you have, in the happy case, it's just one transaction, and in the unhappy case, there will be some penalization. Some parties will be penalized, will pay for the financial cost. So someone is going to pay, and it just doesn't matter if it is 1 or 10 rounds.
Well, cheaper transactions is a good segue, I think, into the garbled circuits conversation. I don't know which one of you wants to take. Probably Liam should answer the question, what is BitVM3 and how did garbled circuits change the game? And then I have some follow-up questions, of course.
Yeah. So the first publication, I think, along these lines is from Jeremy Rubin. He called it Delbrag, which is garbled backwards, if you don't know. But So the once you move into the BitVM paradigm, you have these optimistic games. Like somebody makes a claim, somebody can provide a fraud proof. Then, what garbled circuits allow you to do is keep the same sort of basic setup, but instead of the claim being a series of like commitments to intermediate states, as it would be in BitVM, it can just be the input to the function. And the fraud proof, instead of being like piece of Bitcoin script, can just be a signature. And the way we do this is we conditionally reveal a secret from this garbled circuit cryptographic object off-chain if the operator is malicious. So you can just remove basically everything on Bitcoin, move everything off-chain. And yeah. And another perspective is it's kind of like interactive witness encryption. People know what that is. So it's like
So basically it reduces.
witness encryption would be like garbled circuits if anybody could provide input. So in the garbled circuits paradigm, only the garbler or the operator can provide input. But if you have witness encryption, anybody can provide input. So you can sort of flip it. Instead of doing like an optimistic thing where you provide a fraud proof, you could require somebody to actually just provide a proof. But that person could be anybody. At least, big asterisk, unclear exactly how to do it.
So TLDR, Robin always says this improves BitVM2 by a factor of 1,000, makes
On-chain
transactions
costs,
infinite, on-chain costs specifically. But there are off-chain costs to consider and other trade-offs potentially with garbled circuits. What are those?
So we want to garble a snark verifier because snark verifier is kind of like a universal verification primitive. But snark verifiers are expensive, and garbled circuits work naturally with binary circuits. There are many types of garbling schemes, but the simplest ones use binary circuits. So converting a snark verifier to a binary circuit, it has billions of gates, and then when you garble that, it takes a lot of computational effort, and it produces a very large cryptographic object that you have to store and then use.
How, from a practical perspective, what kind of costs are we talking here? Is it such that it's just a handful of people who are going to be able to participate in this operation?
It's about 400 gigabytes of storage to store the. Oh, maybe I'm wrong. Hang on.
Each table for Groth is about 50 gigabytes, and then if you want to use it in a bridge, you don't just store one table. You have to store, but then it depends on exactly how you build the bridge. It's no, that's the right order of magnitude, roughly terabytes of garbling tables.
And also there is the cost of proving that these tables were built correctly. So if you use the classical cat and choose mechanism, then you have to transmit many more circuits, maybe 100 circuits, and then there's a trade-off in the number of circuits you have to store to the number of circuits you have to transmit initially. So there is a lot of trade-offs to be made, and in one of the setups that I think one of the companies doing this is they are storing 20 of these circuits just to be able to evaluate one and find one that is correct from the 20 that are potentially 19 could be malicious. Okay, so there's a lot of trade-offs that each one of the breaches will make their own choices.
How prohibitive is this relative to the former BitVM2 design, realistically, practically? Is it not that big of a deal, or is it actually a serious thing that we need to be worried about? Okay.
I don't know. It's again kind of a philosophical question. It's a lot more data off chain. It's a lot cheaper on chain. If you don't want more than 20 operators or watchtowers, depending on how you do it, then it's fine. If you want 1,000, then it probably won't work, I think.
I'm curious, since you both brought this up, I'm going to ask both of you. So you both said that you were researching garbled circuits and brought up garbled circuits at various points along your research, even before BitVM1, or I think maybe last year before you were bringing this up in a post-BitVM world. What was the block to using garbled circuits at that time? Why were garbled circuits not used back then? And you each, I think, probably have different answers to this question.
I can speak very specifically. Like I proposed this at Alpen, like that we do this, and basically the decision. So it, from my perspective, I think that actually I'd be really interested to hear the Fairgate side of this too, because like a lot of people were really interested in the permissionless challenging aspect of BitVM2, and if you wanted to use Groth garbled circuits, when I first brought them up. And I'm like, well, it'll be like a 50 gigabyte garbling table. I have no idea how long it'll take to garble, and maybe we need to store one per deposit or something, because it was just like, basically, it just looked like it wouldn't be practical. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the same happened. We had a conversations. I remember at the time BitVM was invented, and we knew about the possibility to use garble circuits in this setup. But we thought, okay, it's impractical. But then when we actually use BitVM and we know the trade-offs we've made with BitVM, then garble circuit become much more attractive. So I think many of us were already knew that garble circuit could solve these problems. But maybe we will try BitVM first because it seems to be more straightforward to develop it. And then kind of everyone is kind of backtracking or say maybe the garble circuit thing was the right choice.
How did that change? Like, what was the unlock? Was it just Jeremy Rubin being like, no, seriously, guys, this works?
I think Jeremy got everybody excited, and specifically Robin, he got excited about it, and then everybody started talking about it, and then I think Hakan from Citreo is the first to start like implementing it. They're just like, let's see how it goes, and then yeah, I think there's just been this like grind of like people. Maybe honorable mention to Mikhail from Babylon as well has made like massive improvements in the garbling time, which I think ends up being like, depending on how you use it, one of the more limiting factors. Like it takes maybe like an hour to garble all of the garbling tables on a laptop or something like that. Yeah, and then once everybody's doing it, you got to do it, right? So.
The first time I encountered them was shortly before BitVM, when I was doing the triangle generator thing. I was making a lot of stuff that used binary circuits in Bitcoin script, and I needed to find programs that were written in binary circuits, which are kind of hard to find because normally you write a CPU in logic gates, but you don't write the programs in logic gates. That's what programming languages are for. But a few people were writing programs in logic gates that I could then convert to Bitcoin script and try them out in my little circuit board thingy. And a lot of what I found was from Ethereum developers. There was like a group of 3 or 4 Ethereum developers who were using garbled circuits for something. I don't know what they were using it for, but they made a few programs that, like, they made a SHA-256 function and put it into a garbling circuit and stuff. And so I was able to get their circuit diagrams and then run them in my thing. And I was like, hey, it runs on Bitcoin. That's cool. So that was the first time I encountered garbled circuits as well. It was just because they were one of the few things that people were writing programs in logic gates apparently for some use on Ethereum. I don't think anyone in Ethereum really uses them, but someone was experimenting with it for a while. So yeah, I don't know. I thought that was in it. There you go.
I also, because of the constraints of the Groth garbling table, I in parallel was working on designated verifier snark that would have a smaller, like a 1,000 times smaller circuit or something like that to garble, and that's Glock. But yeah, so I think
that was going to be my next question. Was like, it seems like there's like various schemes and different sort of, I don't know if implementations is the right word, of these garbled circuits that different teams are using. Like, how do different flavors of garbled circuits express themselves? Like, what does that actually mean that they're like these sort of different, how is a Glock different than BitVM3 or whatever?
Yeah, so from our perspective, it depends obviously on what kind of snark you want to implement, on what elliptic curve you implement it. And so you may need this garbling scheme to support arithmetic operation, like field operations that with mixed mode arithmetic. And so we were working on this side to be able to do much more on the garbling side. But as Liam mentioned, he's working on binary curves, so he has completely different needs from the underlying garble circuit.
yeah. there are many different types of circuits. Circuit is just you have like these little sort of gates that perform operations. You have wires that carry values, and so if you have like this reoccurs all the time, but generally if like the thing you're trying to do aligns well with the computational paradigm you're working in, it's much cheaper. So I tried to do a snark that used the binary curves, and if you use binary curves, you can't use pairings because they're too insecure. And yeah, so but I think
Are there reasons? I mean, are there like what are some of the practical, like, you know, I guess differences in what you're trying to achieve with these different garbled circuits? Like, why would one company or one bridge implementation want to use one versus another? Like, what are the things that are being optimized for in each case?
there's a bunch of parameters. So there's like the garbling table size. There's the snark, how fast that you can produce the snark. If you can use something off the shelf. So for like Glock, you can't use anything off the shelf. You need a custom snark. It's not that bad. Like you can attach it to the end of an existing thing, and it works. There's the garbling time, the evaluating time. I think that's pretty much it. Sure, but I mean, like at least everybody I think right now is more or less using cut and choose, which is kind of black box, right?
Are there ways that garbled circuits broadly, or different versions, schemes of garbled circuits, are there ways that using garbled circuits versus BitVM2 like radically change the bridge design? Like, what are the practical effects of using garbled circuits on bridge design, if any?
Well, as I mentioned in my previous presentation, there are some things you can do with garbled circuits that you can never do with prior technologies. For instance, this idea of this disclosure, the conditional disclosure of circuits, gives you more power. It's something that it's not present before. Like, for instance, having on-demand security bonds or having covenants. This is something that you cannot do that because the other methods do not allow you to hide information inside the script or the inputs. So there is a jump in capabilities of using garbled circuits.
You just mentioned covenants. Maybe this is a good time for the philosophical portion of this panel. And again, can I get a time check, actually? Like, where are we on time? I just want to make sure. Okay. Okay, cool. So, yeah, you mentioned covenants. You know, obviously, there's a lot of talk about soft forks. There's a lot of talk about introducing new opcodes into Bitcoin. This could, you know, theoretically potentially make BitVM obsolete in a good way. And I'm curious, like, do you guys have strong opinions about what opcodes you would like to see in a dream scenario to make bridging more trustless, more efficient, et cetera? Like, what are you guys hopeful to see in your bridge designs on the opcode front?
I want to be able to verify a snark on Bitcoin in a reasonably efficient way. It's like the thing that lets you do everything else. I mean, I think you kind of want it to be done in a nice way, but if you can't, then we can do it in a hacky way. So, like, I think big integer arithmetic or integer arithmetic and like a way to bridge the gap between big script and small script and transaction introspection together give you like all the tools to build like the best possible kind of bridge roll-up design. You can overcome problems with like the light client, which is necessarily interactive. You can verify snarks. You could verify starks. You don't put a burden of maintaining a snark verifier onto the Bitcoin core developers. People develop their own. You can use new ones as they're invented. Yeah, I think this, in my opinion, this would be the ideal world, and it's what I would propose we do.
Almost all these soft forks that are proposed for Bitcoin is good for BitMian bridges. Like if you have opmul, you can do multiplications, then your circuit, your script go down like 10 times. If you have checksync from stack, then your inputs are much shorter, like 20 or 30 times shorter in size. So you get a lot of compression, you get much better BitVM2, for instance. If you get opcat, you can have Merkle trees and then you can do starks, or maybe you can just have a single public key for a one-time signature. So almost any opcode you introduce to Bitcoin benefits BitVM. So I'm pro most of them. The difficult thing, and the reason I think nothing of this is going to happen, is like reaching consensus at this point in Bitcoin. For me, it's just like it's a deadlock. Like
So you put your money on garbled circuits over us getting a new opcode.
I would. I mean, in the past, in many times, I waited for consensus to happen in Bitcoin, like drive chains, for instance, or many other times, and it never happened. And there also you have to consider there can be malicious parties in the Bitcoin ecosystem, like trying to disrupt consensus. And so in the early times, everything was in the Bitcoin forums, but now you have Bitcoin Twitter, where the one who shouts louder gets more attention, and it's impossible to come up to technical conclusions. So I think it's becoming more and more difficult to reach any kind of consensus.
Do you think that, so I think a lot of the folks who are anti these kinds of changes are people who just like broadly don't want programmability on Bitcoin. Like I think that's like really where the rubber meets the road, is that like there's like a portion of people in the Bitcoin development community who just straight up do not want these L2s to exist. Do you think that there is like any validity to any arguments that they just steel manning that they may have on this? And I'd be curious to hear your point of view on this in particular, but like, I'm just curious, like, is MEV like something we should be curious? Like, there's various potential arguments here. Like, let's steel man it.
No, I don't want to steel man the arguments. I find myself to be a very bad representative of arguments that I disagree with. I always phrase them in a way so that I can highlight the part I disagree with, and then immediately someone's like, "That's a straw man. That's not the thing I believe." So I don't trust myself to accurately represent the viewpoints of other people who, if I disagree with them. Sorry. Here, Liam, you can try.
So I was recently having a conversation about this, and just because of the circles that I exist in, I don't encounter a lot of people that are able to make these arguments in a way that I find makes sense. But so need background. I think that like things like MEV don't require changes to Bitcoin. They can come entirely from meta protocols, as we have seen. So I don't find that argument persuasive. And I think that things like alternate assets, messing with consensus incentives, also doesn't require changing Bitcoin. It's sort of like a variant of MEV. But the version that I've heard that is makes sense is if we had like ZK verification on Bitcoin and we could do like a roll up the right way, then more people might actually use it. Like if you have BitVM, people might just not use it because it's like expensive or complicated, or they don't trust the assumptions. But if you had the real thing, then they would use it, and then all the problems would emerge. So this is the most convincing version of this argument I have heard.
One last thing, there is a paper of maybe 10 years ago that states that basically if you have any other consensus platform, Ethereum or anyone, that has a Bitcoin oracle, then basically you can make bribes and everything, all the bad MAV, you can do that already. It's complicated maybe because you have to write contracts in another chain, but essentially you can do all the bad things right now. So I don't see why would cripple Bitcoin in such a way.
Another argument, and this is my favorite, Paul Stort's disruptive argument about just sort of BitVM in general, although I think this is easily fixable. This isn't really a BitVM issue, but maybe just like a layer 2 broad issue, is that most of the bridges that are being built right now, most of the L2s that are being built right now do not merge mine, do not contribute back to the security budget. I'm curious, like, is there concern about, all this money leaving the L1 and then, miners aren't getting paid because all the transactions are happening on a second layer? Thoughts on, if we move into a truly L2 world where all transactions are happening on L2, like, how does that screw with miner incentives and et cetera?
Well, it's already happening with Lightning, right? Lightning nodes do not pay to.
No one uses Lightning.
But, well, I can tell you from my perspective, when I designed Roostock, one of the main objectives, the main goals was to contribute back to the Bitcoin miners, and Bitcoin miners in Rusto get all the transaction fees. They just there's 85 or even 90% of the Bitcoin network that is merge mining Rusto, and they are getting the transaction fee. So we are contributing back, and the original idea of a sidechain were mostly all merge mining. This idea, so there is a way. The fact that these bridges by themselves they don't not contribute, because once you have a lot of liquidity that moved into the L2, those bridges are not going to have continuous transfers of funds. So the possibility to incentivize miners to support the BitVM bridges by transfer fees or withdrawal fee, I see it's very low incentive for that. So for me, sidechains should contribute back, either merge mining or just directing somehow the transaction fees they collect into the L1 again.
I think it's funny we're here and DevConnect is next week because they're having a very similar conversation in Ethereum because they have the L2 roadmap and people are always like, well, our L2 is parasitic to L1, etc. I think that Bitcoin L2s, depending on how they work, are sort of they're buying block space. So like if you're doing some kind of like DeFi rollup that inscribes data into Bitcoin, you're making the Bitcoin block space more valuable because you can do more with it. So you increase the prevailing fee rate. Like in principle, like if there was enough people using the rollup, they would just buy all of the block space because they'd be willing to pay like 1,000 times higher fees. So I think that as long as the rollups are actually rollups and putting data on Bitcoin, then that is aligned with mining incentives.
Lots of people use Lightning. It's not. This sounds like some Paul Sports nonsense.
That was a half joke.
Well, yeah, but he says that he's not joking. He actually doesn't think anyone's using Lightning, and they are. There's a lot of transactions on there. And one of the good things about it is that anyone who sets up a Lightning node, you have to make a channel. That's an on-chain transaction. Likely, you're going to close that channel event at some point. That's a second transaction.
Isn't this why Paul Stortz says that Lightning doesn't work, though? Isn't this the whole reason why Lightning doesn't scale? It's because you have to do all these L1 transactions. Like, it seems like there's this fundamental tension.
Pick a lane, Paul. Either no one uses Lightning, so it doesn't use enough block space, or there's too many people using Lightning and it's using too much block space.
It seems like we're going to need to find this perfect balance, though, between getting like just enough transactions off-chain that like users don't have to pay a lot of fees, but just enough on-chain transactions that miners are still getting paid. Like, it feels like a tension. It does feel like there's this fundamental like problem, and we're going to need to like find the exact perfect little. I mean, do you not agree?
No, or I didn't. I was actually not paying attention. So can you repeat it?
I mean, it just seems to me, right? Like, so you want to get as many transactions off-chain as possible that transactions are cheap for users. But you also want to keep as many transactions on-chain that, like, miners still get paid. And so there feels like a tension there. Like, there's going to be, like, a perfect gray area down the middle that we're going to have to hit in terms of on-chain transactions.
Well, I think one of the ways that L2s or the concept of L2s in general approach this or have an impact on this is that you have to move your Bitcoins in order to get onto the L2. You have to, like with Lightning, you have to open the channel, and in order to get off the L2, you also have to do a transaction. So every L2 does contribute to L1 security by consuming block space.
But it's unclear. It's unclear, like, how many like transactions. Like, if you just like, how many L1 transactions are you going to need to make in order for the miners to feel happy about what they're getting paid, basically? Like, they're still losing transactions by definition when transactions go to the L2.
No, they're not. I don't think that's accurate. Like, let's say that you've got 100 people who might use Bitcoin, but they want it to not cost $10 per transaction to do so. So all 100 of them use the Lightning Network. That's 100 transactions to open their channels that you didn't have before. So it adds to the number of transactions on L1 in order for them to get onto the L2.
Okay, so also really quickly on time, I think we're about to run out of time, so I'm going to make this the opportunity for audience Q&A. Thank you for hanging with us up until this point. Does anyone have questions? Don't be shy. Yeah, we love those.
I don't know. Maybe it's a bore. Everybody's very excited about garbling secrets now because everyone is trying to come up with a scheme that really works, it's efficient, and it's really implementable in the real life situations. But is anybody thinking about what's going to be the next thing after garbage circuits?
What are the unanswered research questions is really, I think, what's happening here.
Yeah, I wanted to say this during the covenant thing because people find it funny, but I think there's a real possibility that cryptography research moves faster than Bitcoin social consensus, and we solve witness encryption before we get a covenant. So, but yeah, there's better cryptography that is not practical. Like you can build there's cryptography. So one limitation of garbled circuits is that they're single use. You can use different kinds of cryptography to have garbled circuits you can use multiple times, which reduces the impact of garbling table size. You can have, as I mentioned before, witness encryption, which is kind of like a garbled circuit, but much more powerful. And then the most powerful thing is indistinguishability obfuscation, which is kind of like it's not exactly, but it's basically like a way to take a program and encrypt it into a blob that all you can do is run the program. So you can put private state inside of it. You can build like a signature oracle that only signs transactions if certain conditions are met. You can have smart contracts with private state. So these are like the cryptography research questions. And I mean, then there's also the much more like down to earth thing of just like making a better garbling scheme for a snark. So I think there's going to be a lot of progress in this.
Where of those things, where are you personally putting your energy in the next 6 to 12 months?
The better garbling schemes. I have a better garbling scheme I'm working on right now.
So. Alpha.
Yeah. As I don't know. I think it'll be like significantly better, significantly smaller garbling tables, significantly faster garbling time, evaluating time. So you keep.
You heard it here first, you
coming
guys.
soon.
I think that witness encryption is interesting in itself, but it doesn't really solve many problems. It brings more problems in a certain way because, okay, so now everyone can unlock certain things, but there's no possibility to sign some part of the proof. Let's say I want to say, okay, this is the best chain, and there is a cumulative work of some amount of work, and I cannot do that because the only I can do is put the input and reveal some disclosed secret. So it seems that it solves some problems, but it also brings problems that garbled secret do not have. Like you can actually sign the input with garbled secret, and you can create another garbled secret that can contest, like can be a counterproof and reuse that data, that input that you had in the previous one. So I think it's super powerful, but it brings new problems. And I think that everyone is worried about quantum computing, and many of these schemes, like not traditional garbled secrets, but these other things may not be quantum resistant. So there will be also a tension between the Bitcoiners that want to move forward to more secure cryptography, quantum secure, and these schemes that may not be quantum secure.
Did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I just was going to ask for more audience questions, but he has something, so I'll give it to him.
I think one thing you can do with witness encryption is you can make it properly permissionless challenging BitVM rollup, because you can do a light client with witness encryption that doesn't require the party to be known in advance.
Can you TLDR witness encryption, like just for the layman?
So when you have an encryption scheme, a public key encryption scheme, you have a public key and a private key, and you can decrypt if you have the private key for the public key that you have encrypted to. Witness encryption, your public key is like a set of things. It's like it's basically just a problem. So it's like if you have a valid snark, then you can decrypt this object. But any valid snark, so like you describe what it means to be a valid snark, and that is your public key, and then any snark is your private key that lets you decrypt. So you could encrypt a message to a Bitcoin blockchain with a certain amount of work. So it's kind of like you can encrypt something to the future that we can only decrypt once we've done a certain amount of work.
So is it like your public key is the problem and your private key is the answer?
Yes.
Cool. Any other audience questions? All right, cool. I think we're probably out of time. Yeah. This was fun. Thank you so much, you guys. Any other burning desires from the group right now?
Just really excited about the future of advanced smart contracting on Bitcoin. And hey guys, we can compute anything using BitVM. Let's make some cool programs that actually do cool stuff with it, and not just talk about how cool BitVM is all day. Actually make stuff with it. It's pretty cool.
Totally.
I want to say that one of the key ideas of the BitBMX platform is to integrate every new verification engine, every new these are plugins for the platform. We want this platform that you write your application with a single interface and you don't care about which underlying verification technology is used. Like he will come up with a better Gabble secret. Let's plug it into the platform so you don't have to change your code and you can upgrade it as it goes. So for me, it's trying to to invite people and developers to use the BitVMX platform and contribute with their new ideas.
Awesome. All right, guys. That was awesome. Thank you so much.